Hi, I'm John Rennie from Boneyard Pictures. Recently I wrote and presented an episode for my friends over at the channel Squabblebox about the classic X-Files episode Squeeze and Tombs. If you haven't seen that one, I'll link my work with Squabblebox below the video. Now, I have always been an X-Files fan.
Scully, wake up! You gotta see this.
When I was young, I would eagerly await the episodes as they first aired in the UK week by week, waiting to see what awesome cases of the supernatural, oddities and UFO encounters that FBI agents Mulder and Scully would witness next.
What are they?
Just keep watching, it's unbelievable.
After reviewing Squeeze and Tombs, I thought I'd watch the series again. So I dug out my DVD collection and started from the beginning. And last night, while watching Season 5, an episode came on that I had forgotten about. But as soon as it began, I once again realized why I love the X-Files so much.
That was extreme.
This episode that I want to take a quick look at is an episode of the X-Files that helped to take the show in a new direction. It was heavily stylized, injected laugh-out-loud, pitch-black humor into the show.
Coffee?
Sure.
And took its cues from classic literature and horror movies. When I first saw it as a young horror film fan, it changed the way that I thought television could look. This is the X-Files fan favorite of Season 5, the Post Modern Prometheus. Whenever I come back to this show, it's like seeing an old friend, and I realize that the X-Files really is one of the best shows to air on television. I put it up there with my favorite crime shows from the days such as Twin Peaks.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
And I have to say Paul Haggis's Due South, which I am also a huge fan of.
The day I take help from a boy like you is the day I'll put this to my own head.
I remember when this episode first aired, and I think it was about 1998 here in the UK, because we usually got episodes later, and I checked and this episode aired on November 97 in the States. And it was like nothing that I'd seen before. I was already a huge monster movie fan, and loved watching the classic monsters.
It's alive! It's alive!
And when this episode's title came up, and the first shots were in black and white, I knew that we were in for something different.
Is there anything that you don't believe in, Mulder?
This episode was written and directed by the series creator Chris Carter, and in commentary, he tells us that this episode was inspired by the classic 1931 James Whale film of Frankenstein.
It was a kind of combination fairy tale, folk tale, and revolved around the Frankenstein story, using sort of modern science. I took an old style, which is black and white, and an old approach, which is a kind of James Whale approach to science fiction, and came up with a story about a lovelorn monster who happened to have a share fetish.
But the title, The Post Modern Prometheus, is a play on Mary Shelley's original classic sci-fi horror novel Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus. So the show is a homage to the story, and also the work of James Whale, hence the beautiful black and white cinematography.
There, up there.
Turn that damn thing off!
I always admired how Carter wore his influences on his sleeve. This was the first time that I had heard the words postmodern being used, as I was a kid then, and I had to look it up, and I found that what it means is that Carter was open about his influences, and that the episode itself was self-referential of the horror genre, using all the well-trodden classic tropes and horror techniques such as the thunder and lightning,
It's the great mutato.
and the angry villagers hunting the monster.
We have come to the murderer! Keep together. You search there. The rest come with me.
Carter also said another early influence on the show came from X-Files science advisor Ann Simon, whose laboratory partner or friend was doing experiments with the genetics of flies and growing extra body parts on them.
Witness the morphogenesis of Drosophila, the fruit fly.
He was able to take the genes that produce the eye of a fly, manipulate it so that it would create a leg He was creating little monsters, in other words, and I thought this was so interesting and so much like Dr. Frankenstein.
Fly has legs.
Growing out of his mouth.
And those actual experiments were used in the storyline as the work of the villain, the mad scientist, Dr. Polidori.
Why would you do that?
Because I can.
In another nod to the work of Mary Shelley, John William Polidori was famously the personal physician to creative Lord Byron in the 1800s, and Byron famously hung around with Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, back in their wild bohemian days. A cool little detail, I thought.
Who sent you here?
Your father.
My father is a simpleton farmer. He understands nothing of my scientific achievements.
And of course, we have to mention the great influence of singer and actress Cher on this episode. Carter said that listening to her music for a whole summer was something that inspired the choice to use her fantastic music in the show. But also, she'd expressed an interest in being in the show, as had comic actress Roseanne Barr, and Carter had written this show with Roseanne and Cher in mind for certain roles, but because of many things, unfortunately, they couldn't commit. Although Cher later said that she regretted this, as she was a huge fan of the show and this episode.
I didn't want to do it when I first read it because I thought, oh, this is going to be cheesy. I wanted them to ask me to come on and act, but then they just wanted me to come on and sing. Had I known, had I seen the quality of it, I would have done it in a heartbeat. But just reading it and then thinking, well, there's no part here for me. I kept looking for, something, but then just to kind of come on and be myself, it wasn't anything I wanted to do until I saw it, and then I thought, oh, shit, I should have done that.
But I should also add that actress Patty Tace, who plays the role intended for Roseanne in this show, is phenomenal. And I can't imagine this episode without her now.
What did I do?
All I can say is I hope the answer to that question is nothing.
But back to Cher's involvement, her music adds a touch of class to the show, I think. And in the emotional final moments when we hear her version of Walking in Memphis, it gives us a moment of high emotion in the episode. And I have to say, when Mulder and Scully are in each other's arms dancing, I might have shed a little small tear of joy. It's a powerful and an emotional end to a great episode that spreads a message of joy and how we should all love and be accepted, something I find very uplifting about the whole episode.
Is it hard to love these babies?
Well, it's not for love.
The power of Cher's strong voice and the choice of such iconic songs show that Carter had his hands on the audience's emotional heartstrings all the way throughout the episode. It's a fantastic piece of writing and a great piece of TV direction.
It was the sort of perfect Mulder-Scully moment in a relationship that had not been, physical. All of a sudden, here were these two characters dancing lovingly, and even kind of romantically together. It was sweet, and I'll never forget it.
But overall, it's James Whale's film of Frankenstein that has the overbearing influence on the whole episode. And that really shows in the style that makes this episode stand out. Carter was a young director at the time, having only directed a handful of TV productions, and he made some really brave stylistic choices. For example, Carter added vast, beautiful looming skies that were inspired by Frankenstein in post-production, and it just looks wonderful. His use of wide-angle lenses is another great addition to the style of the episode. Carter said that wide-angle lenses were used all the time in the show for fast shooting, but he used the wide frame to give this episode a unique comic book feel.
Mrs. Berkowitz had a tubal ligation 2 years ago.
You can't plant a seed in a barren field.
As the wide lens allows for great low angles as well as well-composed shots, again, giving this episode a beautiful, wide cinematic feel to it.
I love shooting with a wide-angle lens, and it's a lens that we use all the time on the X-Files, but not incessantly like I used it here. But it gives you all kinds of opportunities to stuff the lens low into people's faces and to give you big, dramatic, but in this case, cartoony angles.
This episode, as it began with being self-referential and a little off-kilter for the series so far, allowed Carter to invent some great comedic and surreal moments, as he wasn't going for the realism that the show usually had. This was a cartoon-like episode, and one that is made with great respect for its influences, and its great writing that takes us on an emotional roller coaster just works.
It's alive.
Over the course of Season 5, The X-Files was nominated for 16 Emmys, 7 of which were for this episode alone. One being a nomination for Best Director for Carter, and the show's effects team, Graham Murray, Greg Lohan, and Shirley Ingot, received an Emmy for their outstanding art direction. And in my opinion, they should have won more. Listening to Chris Carter in commentary of the show, you realize how hard a job it is to make something this good and this unique on a tight schedule and budget for television. Doubles were often used for Mulder and Scully because things moved so fast. Gillian Anderson was doubled by Arlene Pileggi, who is the wife of Mitch Pileggi, who plays one of my favourite characters on the show, Walter Skinner. And David Duchovny was doubled by Steve Kysiak. And sometimes, it's hard to tell which is which in this episode.
The scene was done with doubles. David and Jillian were always running from first unit to second unit, and we'd work them constantly. They rarely did they have a day off, rarely did they have a few hours off. And so scenes where you didn't need to feature the actors' faces on camera, you could stage using doubles. In this case, Mitch Pileggi's wife, Arlene Warren, and David's stunt double, who actually learned how to walk like David during the course of the show and run like him too. They are the two people who get out of the car here.
The atmospheric look of this episode was also helped by some happy accidents.
There were things that I didn't know how beautiful they would come out. This shot of running in the woods at night. I had no idea how beautiful it would look in black and white. Joel Ransom just did such an incredible job, particularly because he had never shot black and white on this kind of schedule before. But I think it just is a testament to his incredible talent and eye and imagination that he was able to give us something, as stunning as this episode.
The weather is wild in Vancouver where the show was filmed, and in the ending, you can see hard rain lashing off the rooftops. But this wasn't a problem. Carter says it's this stunning cinematic weather that helps to give the episode great natural atmosphere. And this, along with Joel Ransom's stunning black and white cinematography, make this episode a pleasure to look at and watch.
The rain here is real. It's one of the beauties of shooting in Vancouver is that you get a lot of free atmosphere. You can see the rain just sheeting off the top of the barn. It's all real atmosphere.
Carter also has a great eye for casting, and many of the characters on this show were non-actors. The character of Izzy, for example, was someone that Carter literally saw on the street and struck up a conversation with him and cast him in a role. The actor, Stuart Gale, was the perfect choice for this role.
It's Izzy Berkowitz!
And many of the best moments in the show were his own ad-libs that Carter thought were great and stuck them in.
The actor, Stuart Gale, presses his mouth up to the glass here. It was actually his idea. I saw him standing around clowning and doing this, and I decided to use it in the picture. And it was perfect for the character.
And so many of the other actors in the cast were chosen for their unique looks, and Carter again said that these were some of his favorite castings. My biggest surprise was learning that the monster in the episode, or the Great Mutato as Izzy calls him, was played by show regular Chris Owen, who we all came to know most as the young cancer man or cigarette smoking man who assassinated JFK and Martin Luther King Jr.
I was called in to play the Mutato. Chris gave me a call after I received the script, and he said that he really wanted to find the heart of this fellow and his dignity. You've got this wonderful story, and you've got this sort of character created by the makeup effects and then all the layerings. It was very detailed.
I am alone and miserable, but one as deformed and horrible as myself would not deny herself to me.
He was totally unrecognizable and gave a great performance in this show. Carter mentioned that Owen did the emotional final speech in just a few takes, and he found that the hardest thing to do with the actor was to get him to dance on set. It is clear looking at this episode that it was hard work, and a willingness by the crew to go that extra mile in all departments from lighting, camera, music, production design and directing to name a few that made it work. The comedy might have fallen flat.
I'm accusing.
that your wife may have been impregnated.
And who would have thought that the Frankenstein story would once again successfully play the heartstrings of a new generation, but it surely did.
Hey, he's no monster.
And Chris Carter took a gamble and made a cartoonish, stylized episode that is considered one of the greatest and a fan favourite of all of the X-Files episodes. It was a gamble that paid off and shows us why Carter is a true, successful genius of television. He made this episode for himself as well as the fans, homaging his influences and stretching his limits, and it worked perfectly. For me, my favourite moment is the end, and seeing Mulder and Scully, two characters that I spent my youth watching and falling in love with, looking lovingly into each other's eyes as friends and smiling, it just brings a tremendous feeling of happiness and nostalgia to my little heart. I love this show, and I love this episode, and sharing that happy moment with Mulder and Scully for me is a great moment, and I think it gives us one of writer and director Chris Carter's most compelling and unique moments of storytelling on the X-Files, and one that will be remembered forever as one of the greats.
I especially loved the last few moments where Scully and Mulder danced together.
We all had the feeling like we were doing something new and taking a certain risk.
Kind of a happy ending to a monster story.
It was the sort of perfect Mulder-Scully moment.
Thanks for watching my take on the Post Modern Prometheus, a great work of television. If you would like to see more from me about the X-Files and other works, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.